Metro on WDET. I'm Tia Graham. The definition of colorism is as follows: prejudice or discrimination against individuals with dark skin tone, typically among people of the same ethnic or racial group. And through the cultural lens as a Black American woman with phenotypical darker skin, colorism is a part of my everyday life. The idea that skin color can determine health outcomes or pain thresholds remain prevalent in society. Yet colorism impacts people across the entire globe, including within Latin culture. Rogerio Pinto is a professor in the School of Social Work and professor of theater and drama at the University of Michigan. Born in Brazil, Professor Pinto has dedicated his life to breaking the social constructs of colorism and other isms that divide people. He is here with us now to talk more about his exploration into colorism and how it impacts Latinos and, frankly, all of us. Professor Pinto, welcome to the Metro.
It is a pleasure to be here with you, Tia.
Thank you so much. So, from your personal research and understanding of the world, how do you describe colorism? How do you teach that?
So colorism is precisely what it is you described. There was an initial definition from Alice Walker, who is an American writer, the author of Color Purple. Everybody knows that novel and the movie. That's not where she writes about colorism, but it is someone who started this conversation in the United States just a few decades ago. But it is a conversation that happens across the globe, like you said. And I need to bring up Alessandra Devolsky, which is a professor, a commentator, and who writes a lot about colorism. She's a Brazilian woman of mixed race, as many of us in Brazil are. And she, wrote a book on colorism. And to me, it is probably the best writing about colorism. Another woman making this beautiful collaboration, but more than anything, making this beautiful entryway into areas of research and cultural conversation that others have not. And she brings that definition to a global perspective, where she takes away the idea that this is only intra-race, but it is actually across many different races and ethnicities, because it's color what it is at stake and not necessarily race. And I think that changes the conversation in many ways. Yeah,
can you go into that a little bit and how that is, it's color, it's about the color, it's not necessarily about the person's race.
Yeah, so I'm just saying like a curiosity about Brazil, as I keep doing a lot of research in my own family. There are 3 people deceased in my immediate family. My father, who died at a very young age, at 43, who was the darker partner in my family. And my mother, also deceased, who was the white partner in this situation. And my little sister, who wasn't even 3 years old when she died. And as I keep doing research, no, it's okay. I mean, it was a long, long time ago. I actually have a whole performance piece in a book that's coming out that includes a one-person show about the death of that little sister. I can talk about that at another point. What's important here is that in my father's death certificate, he's identified not by race, but by color. In Brazil, what you have in your death certificate is your color. And my father's color is pardo, which is, it refers to a color in Brazil that is an amalgamation of many different races and ethnicities. It could be black, white, indigenous, and many other types of ethnicities. In this particular case, growing up, I had no idea what my father's mixing was, and I still don't know. And my mother's death certificate is white, and my sister is unknown. They couldn't identify her color. I say this to identify the idea that people across the globe are much more interested in the conversation about color than necessarily attaching specific races to the color and understanding the amalgamation of many different, racial genotypes and phenotypes, and also ethnicities, which when we talk about races, it's like we forget that other ethnicities going on.
Yeah, so just going back for a moment, today in Brazil, are there your birth certificates still color?
There's nothing in the birth certificate. It's the death certificate
Or
that
death
actually
certificate.
carries the color.
Yeah, so that's still today.
Oh, yes. I mean, I just got, fresh copies of the 3 deceased people in my family just a few months ago. And that's what it says.
And so when you grow up in a society that way, or you grow up with that being just everyday life, in what ways do you think, in your personal opinion, shape a person's day-to-day going about life?
Every single thing one does. It is no different. So globally, that being darker or lighter carries its own stigmatization, right, as it is in the United States. But because in the United States, the history of segregation is quite different. For example, the Brazilian history of segregation, whereas in the United States, from the very beginning, people decided that whites are going to be on one side and blacks are going to be in the other. And a lot of people decided not even to consider the indigenous people who had been living here, and how those 3 perhaps initial races and ethnicities actually mixed or didn't mix from the beginning of the colonization of the United States. But Brazil existed long before the United States. The Portuguese actually landed in Brazil in 1500. So we are talking about a much longer history of extermination of different races and ethnicities. By the time, the British landed, quote unquote, landed in the United States, the Portuguese had already created the whole system of elimination of indigenous races and had created the transatlantic slave trade. So the Portuguese had been doing this for 100 years before it started in what we call the initial colonies of the United States. But in Brazil, a major historic point in Brazilian history is that the Portuguese crown, which colonized Brazil, moved to Brazil and in the 19th century. And so as the court moves to Brazil, it completely gets shocked, because it finds a country that they created that was really mostly of people of color. By that point, more than 60% of the population. And so they did the opposite of what happened in the United States. They encouraged more racial mixing, not necessarily by policy. You can't force people to mix, but creating social opportunities for association, so that people from different races could actually come together. Well, so what you have is an amalgamation of all those races that was created, unfortunately, for a very nefarious purpose, which was to erase black races and indigenous races and whiten the population as much as possible. But what happened was the creation of this many, many different colors that I saw growing up, from as dark as my father and as light as my mother, who is considered white, and all of us 8 siblings, wow, having very different colors.
Yeah, it was like a beautiful rainbow in the home.
Mm-hmm.
It was a beautiful rainbow in the home. So, just going forward here and talking about your most recent work, or one of the most recent things that you've done, Twisted Storytellers, with Shatori Shakur, who was recently on the show talking about that particular show, Colorism, that you curated. And I think about just the power of storytelling in general. So what was your reason for curating Colorism for Twisted Storytellers? What can be gained from hearing about the impacts of colorism across different cultural or ethnic groups?
Well, so here I am and looking at you, Tia, and seeing, a few surprises in your face, right, about some of the things that I just talked about.
Yes.
And I'm sure your listeners are also getting a few moments of surprises, right? I think we need to look at those things from a more historical perspective, as I just, talked about, and clearly from a perspective that is more global and less local. Mm-hmm. All those things are very important. We need to look at local, but we need to take perspective from other places. And this is what I try to do. And so I think my existence and my life in Brazil before coming to the United States provides the beginning of a conversation, but it doesn't end in Brazil. I grew up because I had light skin compared to most of my siblings, and so I had a white mother, and my father died long before I could actually remember a lot of his color.
Yeah.
It was a huge loss. I mean, we lost his color where I was 8. So it's like my memory of my father's color is an ashen color in a coffin.
Yeah.
So I grew up with a white mother. And so therefore I must be white. So that's how I identified myself growing up. And that changed. I mean, I learned so much in the United States about being a person of color, which I never had before. It just added more and more many dimensions of my existence that didn't exist before. And I feel today I'm a much more complete person because I know all these many identities. And I like to say, as I said in the Twisted Storytelling event, that I am a person of color, and I am very proud of being a person of color today. But it took years for me to get to that point, and it took me the experience in the United States to actually be able to understand who I am, and even understand the loss of my father's color. That was a very painful journey for me. And I feel that other people may have many different journeys. And I thought that it would be interesting to compare and contrast and celebrate many different journeys. And no better place than the stage with people telling stories that people can then, take on and take their own and be courageous about doing so. Satori Shakur offers through the Twisted, society. Well, not Twisted Society. It's a secret society for Twisted Storytellers. This great, this great stage where people come in and show their vulnerabilities and encourage others to be vulnerable. The thing that I add to it, which I completely agree with Satori, is that what I look for in my research and my social work practice and my art practice is the next thing, which is empathy. It's beginning to empathize with other people's stories, understanding who they are from their perspective. And I think that storytelling is a great way to have conversations with people who perhaps otherwise you wouldn't.
Yes.
And
right now, you're listening to The Metro. We're talking about the effects of colorism in the Latino community with our guest, University of Professor Rogerio Pinto. Now, bringing this conversation back around full circle because you're talking about storytelling, the impact and the power of it. And already we've been talking now. We've already come down towards the end of our conversation. So I do want to talk to you just about what's going on politically, because oftentimes I'll hear politically, and this is something that, once again, this is through social media, this is through what we're listening to, the quote unquote, white Latinos will vote one way, the darker Latinos, and we're talking about the United States of America. And oftentimes I just feel like that is such a divisive way of looking at the Latino community within the United States of America. It's not a monolith. It's so diverse. So could you talk about how those type of conversations impact everyday life for Latinos in the United States?
Yeah, and I am in a position that is even more peculiar because I am Brazilian.
Yes.
The biggest country in South America where we speak Portuguese, right? So I am Latinx, not because of the language that we share, but because of geographic location. And of course, the many cultural things that we shared as well as our colonizers Spain and Portugal share still today, but many differences as well. But I think we share more similarities than anything else, as I believe and I know biologically, which is, my initial, I'm a biologist by training before I became a social worker and an artist.
That's cool.
Thank you. So my understanding from biology, which is really where my research begins, my social and cultural research actually begins, because a lot of things have been said based on biological stuff, like even color, right? Red, white, yellow, right? That kind of a thing that we know from the 17th century. But bringing this to the current political atmosphere that we have, we know, for example, that in Florida, Cubans who consider themselves white, right? Mm-hmm. They identify themselves white. Yes. And I'm not here to say whose color one is.
Yes.
But they have a tendency to vote in a particular way, in a more conservative way. I think that the conservatism and the capitalist nature of some of the voting gets lost when we use color and race as, why people vote in a particular way. Latinos who come to the United States, many of us have lived a life as white people, but we become a person of color the day we arrive. And for some people whose lives have been really as white, I happen to be mixed and have come to an epiphany. Oh, I understand my color. But not everyone. There are German people who are fully white. My mother, she couldn't be anything else but white, fully Portuguese with some German on her background. If my mother moved to the United States and heard that she was a person of color, she'd not only be confused, she probably would resent because it is her identity, right? It's not so much about the color or the race, but it is her identity as a woman who is white. And so I think by conflating people and creating a situation where everybody actually gets lost. The United States has had historically a tendency of having this black-white kind of dialogue. Yes. And what happened is by having that and maintaining that dialogue, everybody in between who have many different shades of color they are not part of that conversation. And I think that conservative politics have always been to take away the rights of black people. There's no... I'm not creating this. It's history, right? Segregating people, taking things away. And there is a strain of conservatism that is about taking away things that people have gained, like human rights, for example, and creating a more punitive system where they can create even more systems to punish and to imprison people who are not white. So I think that the Latino population that may have voted in a particular way toward conservatism may be getting a very rude awakening because they are not white like the people that the conservatives are talking about. They are Latinos, right? So someone like me, because I'm aging and I have gray hair, white hair or whatever, I may be confused as not being, a person from Latin America.
Yeah.
But the truth is, but I am still at risk to be picked up by anybody and be sent to Guatemala for all I know, as anybody else is. And the younger you are and the darker you are, the more at risk you are. So this is just like in every analysis that one does. Darker skin, more risk. Younger, more risk.
Rogerio Pinto is the Diversity Social Transformation Professor. He is also a professor of theater and drama of School of Music, Theater, and Dance at the University of Michigan.
And art and design. And
a professor of social work. We were chatting so well. We had such a great conversation. Didn't even notice the time. I know we were talking so well. I can't wait to have you back on the show to continue a conversation and continue to keep up with what you're doing, especially as an artist. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor Pinto.
And thank you so much, Tia, for having me here. It's been great.
Coming up, auto history is also part of Latino history here in Detroit. We'll learn a little bit more about the impact of Latinos and Southwest Detroit on Michigan's auto industry. You all stay right there. This is The Metro.